Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update for the 8th of September 2023. Let's go to where we normally start. All the usual caveats apply. You can see those caveats in the description below. And my goodness, what a day of losses yesterday was for the Russians. And again, it's trying to work out how accurate these claims are, but it talks to a trend, if nothing else. 640 personnel lost is on the higher end of the kind of range we've been seeing. We've been sort of somewhere between 400 and 650 since the counteroffensive began. I think there was one day, maybe two, that spiked higher than that, but generally that's where we're at. So 640 is at the higher end. 20 is not like it was back at the height of Bakhmut meat grinder attacks. That's sort of over 1,000 a day, but this is significant. 23 tanks, 23 APVs, 31 artillery systems. In those three categories, that's a phenomenal loss. Is that accurate? I don't know. I can't say. The question, and lots of you asking, can you give any more detail on this? Why is there this tipping point that's not been reached? It's really difficult to say. So one, it's difficult to say how accurate these figures are. But there is a protocol they have to go through, a kind of jump through a bunch of hoops to submit those statistics to their higher up, and then those to their own, like, up the chain of command before these statistics get released. So it's not just pulling out their posteriors by all accounts. And then there is evidence that we see to support this on the socials, open source intelligence analysts putting stuff together to either confirm or disconfirm, or it's difficult to disconfirm, loss claims because you can't prove that didn't happen, right? But nonetheless, we try and build up a picture, and that's what I do on a daily basis. And then the issue, like, well, where is this going to have effect? How is this going to have effect? When is it going to have effect? Are most of these losses in the southern regions? Now, does this mean that the Russians are severely lacking in this kind of equipment, so that now's the time that the Ukrainians can take advantage and overcome the Russians? It's just really difficult. There are so many questions that are very difficult to answer. Just going down the list then, one multiple launch rocket system, one anti-aircraft warfare system, 29 drones, that will be probably from the night before last, 47 vehicles and fuel tanks. We are seeing just insane numbers of vehicles being taken out. Now, I think what we will not be seeing a lot of visual evidence of are the strikes behind the lines in places like Berdyansk, Mariupol. What we see is the odd bit of footage coming out of burning in the distance from people who might be sort of pro-Ukrainian in the area, but when understandably not getting evidence of what's hit with those strikes. So if there are, so it could be that a Storm Shadow missile or two is taking out a facility in, for example, Mariupol, and that could be in one fell swoop, I don't know, 15 vehicles taken out. I'm just making this up, but you're unlikely to see the evidence of that. But the Ukrainians will have some kind of idea. They'll have satellite imagery that can point to what has been taken out and what hasn't, and then that gets totted up, and we go, well, that's not on Twitter. So did it happen? It's like, yeah, there are loads of other sources of information that we are not privy to. So it's worth bearing that in mind. But 47 vehicles and fuel tanks is a massive, massive number, obviously, and one piece of special equipment. So that is one of the heaviest days of equipment losses I can remember across the categories. And then remember, over the last couple of weeks, we've seen high numbers of MLRS. Was it yesterday or the day before? And then high numbers of anti-aircraft systems on certain days as well. So, okay, let's go and look at some of the open source pieces of data collection. Here is Oryx, the visual confirmed loss aggregator. He has 43 Russian pieces of equipment lost. So that's a daily loss. So when you go back to here and say, well, that's an awful lot, and that is 100 pieces of equipment there, give or take, so 50, 40, 70, so actually 120 odd pieces of equipment. Well, actually 43 bits of equipment are recorded here. So, that is a high number of losses recorded in just one day. So are these figures realistic? Well, they're at least somewhat realistic. I mean, that you can imagine they are at the benchmark minimum, sort of half true, because 43 isn't going to be everything, right? So we can certainly assume there will be more equipment outside of that 43. So let's say, I don't know, add just another 20 and you've got to halfway. And then in terms of the Ukrainian losses, so in the same time, that's 43. So this is about a ratio of 3.5 to 1. Russian losses to Ukrainian. Ukrainian losses 12 here, including a transport helicopter there. I don't know when that was from, but that is going to be a sore loss. Let's look at the Russians, see if there's anything particularly that stands out. Just a lot of infantry fighting vehicles and a lot of tanks as well. So that kind of fits into this idea that they are losing a lot of equipment, a lot of heavy equipment. Then when we go to Andrew Perpetua, the mapper that's counting up what he sees on the socials and on videos and imagery, these are the losses I could identify today. They're based on video and photographs found today. A large fraction are geolocated and put on the map. These losses represent only what crossed my desk. It is not meant to portray anything beyond that. Really worth remembering that this is just a snapshot of one guy, what passes under his nose in terms of equipment loss. And as you can see, quite a lot of surveillance and comms there, 4 pieces. That's your special equipment. 2 recovery vehicles that would probably fall under that as well. So that's 6 pieces there. Now, although we only saw 1 today, there were quite a few, I think yesterday was it? And then quite a large number of tanks there to be added. Not a lot of artillery, interestingly, and quite a few infantry fighting vehicles. And for the Ukrainians, what do we have? A few bits of comms equipment, a couple of bits of artillery, only 1 tank, a T-64, and then a number of infantry fighting vehicles, APCs and whatnot, and then a lot of civilian stuff. So, 3 pickups, an SUV pickup there. So actually, out of the Ukrainian losses, if you're talking about really high value bits of equipment, it doesn't look too bad. Comms may be quite high value, but M113, YPRs aren't particularly, and Humvees aren't particularly high value pieces of equipment, and T-64. So again, I think the Russians are having a tough time in terms of losing equipment. Let's go and see what else we can find out from the socials. So during this is not new footage, but it's just from a different angle. It's that piece of really high value equipment that was lost in Zalizhny port near Kherson, or in the Kherson Oblast. And it's an electronic warfare complex. I think, very rare bit of kit. Is it the Predel E or something? What was it called? Reportedly around $200 million worth of kit. And there it is, burning. And that was a huge loss to the Russians, no doubt, because they just don't have many of those at all. Really high value. And here we have destruction of Buk air defense system equipment. Actually, it's a destruction of at least 2 bits of equipment right near each other. I don't know if there's a third bit just sitting there as well that would have probably been a recipient of quite a bit of shrapnel too. But again, when you're seeing these bits of equipment, you've got one video of at least 2 bits of equipment there. That's adding on to those stats as well. And that is air defense system, so that's really high value. In speaking of speaking of the use of drones, as we see drones to spot here, I don't know whether that's HIMARS or just artillery there, but no report says Ukrainian Shark drones. So these are indigenously produced drones that they've been producing for some time now. I think they've upped the production of them. On the hunt for targets in Zaporizhia, in total, 5 Buk air defense systems were destroyed with the help of this new drone with an 80-kilometer range, 4 hours of flight time, and highly resistant to electronic warfare, used for conducting recon and provided target That just went straight through me. Sorry. Providing target designation. So you can see lots of these books being taken out by different, I don't know, different pieces of ordnance, but being targeted by these shock drones that are apparently quite useful. Now, talking about air defense systems, here's an M777 howitzer battery at work being defended by an OSA air defense system. So you can see the battery firing off there, and this OSA air defense system like driving around. This is, I mean, when you've got a battery, obviously needs much more protection than just say a single howitzer hidden in the trees. This is a battery in the open fields doing their work, and they will need to be protected from Lancet drones and from all sorts of other threats. So this is obviously there's a high value target there, needs that OSA. There have been arguments that, you know, S300 systems and whatnot being taken out by Lancets. Where are the Gepards? Why do you not have an air defense system with every single S300 just sitting next to it doing the protection? But we are starting to see that kind of activity. Okay, here we have some incredible footage. So this is a drone trying to take on a Ka-52 attack helicopter. So drones are advancing, gaining capabilities, but unfortunately, this drone didn't quite have the pace for taking on the helicopter. So the helicopter got away. But I wonder whether the drone itself managed to disrupt the mission of the helicopter, which itself is a useful outcome, right? So you got the helicopter, drone just missing it. There, it's a shame if it could have come at it from 20 meters previously, and there could have been an interesting collision there. But the helicopter gets away. But you wonder whether how long it will be till drones have sort of small little rockets that they can fire off them, and you can have drones just hovering in the air, hovering and waiting for targets like attack helicopters. The threat of drones is, I mean, it's only just beginning, right? This is an area of technology, an area of modern warfare that will only increase in capability. Okay, going on to sort of Moscow on fire here. This is a significant bit of fire going off. Now, the claims are that it's the building of the Federal Customs Service being on fire here. And as I say, a fairly significant fire. That has been questioned by some. So OSINT Technical says, just going to jump in here to correct some misinformation. It appears that a warehouse is burning in Moscow, incorrectly reported as the Russian Federal Customs Service headquarters. He does a bit of geolocation. He thinks it's a frozen product and wholesale foods warehouse. That could be a very different thing that's on fire there. But then still, Anton Gerashchenko, who's part of the Ukrainian government here, he's saying that Russian media report that the premises of the Federal Customs Service in Moscow were on fire last night, over 1,000 square kilometers. 1,000 square meters. Now, the claim is that the Russians are reporting it's a Federal Customs, and it's a significant fire too. But either way, this is another example of somewhere in Moscow being on fire. Now, someone yesterday said, "Hey, I was speaking to a friend who works in I don't know what it was, in emergency services, or knows about Russian health and safety and fires," and said this is not unusual for Russia. But I just want to point you to, the reason why I keep reporting this stuff is that I've given you two analyses. One was from Rebar, actually. Another was an open source intelligence an intelligence outfit. I forget the name of them. Who did an analysis of fires, and these are A, more frequent, and B, more serious. Like, what is on fire is just a step change away from what you would expect like 2 or 3 years ago. So you're seeing a lot of railway infrastructure, you're seeing a lot of military installations or things with military connections, a lot of warehouses of things that can be co-opted for the military industrial complex. So it isn't just poor health and safety. There is a step change in the frequency and the size of these fires. Right. Going on to distant strikes, again, another drone attack last night. A wave of 20 Shahed drones were launched towards Odessa. 16 of them shot down, so 4 still getting through, and those 16 that were shot down will still be causing some damage somewhere, right? They often fall down in residential areas or whatever. So this is a problem, and I get the sense that in the Odessa region, in Reni, in Ismail, I think they're feeding it there. I think there's a lot of infrastructure that has been hit. The Ukrainian grain export, storage and export facilities have been seriously affected here. And don't underestimate how much effect these swarms of drones are having. And that is why they continue to do them. And it's one of those sort of funny places that, not funny at all, that were not affected by the war at all, and then suddenly were. You know, Ismail and Reni weren't, and that southern area of Ukraine, south of Odessa, just didn't really feature. And now every night it's being pummeled. Okay, Russian troops launched a missile attack on an administrative building in Kryvyi Rih. 1 person died, 9 were injured. So that's another target hit yesterday. Or last night. I think this might even be from this morning, actually, so that could be a last night strike. Now, talking about the strike on Konstantinivka that hit the market, and the Russians were saying, oh, it's a HARM missile, AGM-88 HARM missile from the Ukrainians themselves. Well, actually, all the information points to that just being a load of Russian propaganda nonsense. Here's a 3D modeling of the whole thing, and you know, there was a lot of talk about reflection on a car, and this is all explained by the 3D modeling and the direction of the missile, where it came from. First video shows the scene from roughly the same angle as the real surveillance video, 18 seconds, especially shaken the improvised rocket so that the reflection on the nearby car was visible. I don't quite know what that means. At 23 seconds did the same so that reflection in the second car was visible. It is in this order as in the video from the surveillance camera that we see reflected in the car if the missile had arrived from the southeast almost vertically, second, so on and so forth. You get the point. This has been 3D mapped to show that it clearly came from the southeast and the Russian missile. So evidence to say that the Russians are talking rubbish. Here we have, this is not from last night, but the night before, as far as I remember. But also there was footage that came out 3 nights ago as well, pretty much similar footage of Gepards taking out Shahed drones. Here,
yes.
so that's one Gepard vehicle taking out 2 drones in a short space of time. So this is how effective the Gepards are, and why getting ammunition to them is so important, and Rheinmetall are onto that. Right, 2 powerful explosions rang out at midnight near Berdyansk Municipal Lyceum, where Russians had located one of their polling stations used in the unlawful election, said the mayor of Melitopol, Ivan Fedorov. So they are still having these strikes. Now, you would assume, given the distance that Berdyansk is from the front line, so that's probably going to be a Storm Shadow hit. The question might be, is a Storm Shadow hit, is a Storm Shadow the right weapon to be taking out election polling stations? I don't know. It seems like a very somewhat low value target for a very high value missile, so I don't know, unless that is a higher value target, and I am giving it credit for. Of course, because, you know, if they can stop the elections from taking place, the upcoming elections, then that could take a lot away from the eventual claims of electoral victory. Ukrainian forces have reportedly managed to hit the Russian Silicon EL microelectrics plant in Bryansk. So if you remember, going back when Ukraine a few weeks back did the massive drone attacks that also hit the airbase up in Pskov, and then they hit a number of places around, including in Bryansk city, where they hit a microelectrics plant, where these components are used in Iskander missiles, I think, or certainly in the defense industry. And that plant has been hit again with a drone, according to sources. And then Kursk was rocked last night with a powerful explosion, which is, I think, still going today. I presume this is the same thing. This is in Kursk, or it's been hit again. I'm not sure, but that's from this morning. So the Ukrainians are doing their best to try and strike into Russia. Now, because I haven't spoken for so long about Elon Musk, no, I have to say this. I can't not report this. So the socials have gone absolutely nuts about this. What's going on? Loads of people railing against Musk. Why is that? So CNN have reported, but it's come from a book that is due to be released, a biography of Elon Musk. So CNN report Musk secretly ordered his engineers to turn off his company's Starlink satellite comms network near the Crimean coast last year to disrupt a Ukrainian sneak attack on a Russian naval fleet. Well, let's go and listen to CNN, see what they have to say.
Yeah, Phil, so this is an excerpt of a biography written by Walter Isaacson that was obtained by my colleague Sean Lingus, and it really provides a new window into Elon Musk's thinking about Starlink's role in the war in Ukraine. Now, as you said, according to this biography, Musk did, in fact, order his engineers to turn off Starlink satellite communications for the Ukrainians when they were trying and planning to launch a sneak attack on Russia's naval fleet around Crimea.
If you remember last year, there was a naval drone. I wonder if it's this one that washed up on the beach in Crimea, on the rocks in Crimea. Do you remember that footage? I can probably find it. But there was one of those before they started properly using those drones. One washed up, and everyone was like, "Oh, Ukraine got naval drones." Well, I think that was the time. So it washed up because it lost all communication. And because the claim is that Musk turned off Starlink.
According to the biography, that was because he had spoken to Russian officials, and he believed that doing so could prompt a response by Russia that was akin to a, quote, mini Pearl Harbor, and that Russia might actually respond by using nuclear weapons. And it also kind of delves into his...
So the question then is, and this is what many people are asking, is what the hell is Elon Musk doing having conversations with senior Russian military officials or political officials? So going over the government's head, like having discussions with Russia, and then Russia convincing him to turn off Starlink to the disaster of the Ukrainian military effort. I mean, this is really, really dodgy.
His ambivalence about using Starlink in a war setting writ large. He said, quote, "How am I in this war? Starlink was not meant to be involved in wars. It was so people can watch Netflix and chill and get online for school and do good, peaceful things, not drone strikes." Now, according to this excerpt, Ukrainian officials begged him to turn the satellites back on, and he actually had a conversation with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, as well as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, about the anxieties that Washington had about Starlink's power and, of course, how he was kind of turning it off and on. But really, this just underscores how powerful Starlink is and how important Elon Musk and his services are to the U.S. government and the Ukrainian government.
Absolutely just fascinating stuff. But people are going mental over this. Musk was told that Ukraine was about to sink the Russian ships that have been firing cruise missiles into Ukrainian cities, and he stopped the operation. Today, those ships are still firing cruise missiles into Ukrainian cities. Jay in Kyiv says, "What a piece of S." So not a big fan. Darth Putin will rename Russian Navy Day to Elon Musk Day. So on and so forth. So lots of stuff. So the CNN article talks about Elon Musk secretly ordered his engineers to turn off the company's Starlink satellite communications network near the Crimean coast last year to disrupt a Ukrainian sneak attack on a Russian naval fleet, according to the excerpt adapted from Walter Isaacson's new biography of the eccentric billionaire titled Elon Musk. As Ukrainian submarine drones strapped with explosives approached the Russian fleet, they, quote, lost connectivity and washed ashore harmlessly. Isaacson writes, Musk's decision, which left Ukrainian officials begging him to turn satellites back on, was driven by an acute fear that Russia would respond to the Ukrainian attack on Crimea with nuclear weapons, a fear driven home by Musk's conversations with senior Russian officials, according to Isaacson, whose new book is set to be released on September the 12th. He said, how am I in this war? As you heard, that quote. And do you know what? There is a conversation to be had about that. But when you're covering the globe in that many satellites, and I talked to you about that before, about how, 53% of all low Earth orbit satellites are Musk satellites, or 80% of the working ones, is it, or something? He has immense power here. Musk was soon on the phone with President Joe Biden's National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff Secretary, as you just heard. Meanwhile, Mikhailo Fedorov, a deputy prime minister in Ukraine, was pleading with Musk to restore connectivity for the submarine drones by telling Musk about their capabilities in a text message, according to Isaacson. Quote from Fedorov to Musk, I just want you, the person who is changing the world through technology, to know this. Right? Okay. And just, Pekka Kalaniemi here says, I wonder where Elon got the idea to shut down the Starlink on the front lines. Ian Mars Chong advising Musk, might be a good idea to take Starlink offline for the terminals used on the front lines. Could encourage them to reconsider their position on advancing towards Crimea and leading the world further into the brink of total war. Now, don't listen to this human being. Ian Mars Chung, I think he's based in Malaysia, is basically an absolute wingnut. Actually racist, is massively involved in American politics, has a huge following. He's one of these people where you're thinking, oh, who are your influencers? Where are you getting your money? Why are you a massive Russia appeaser? Blah, blah, blah. Just a terrible human being. But also, massive influence. So he's a big name. He would be talking to Elon Musk. That is Russian appeasement there in a tweet. And that's exactly what Musk ended up doing. I mean, this is going back to October 2022, and that was about the time he started turning off the Starlink consoles and whatnot. Now, Elon Musk has come back. He denied that 2022 he limited the operation of the Starlink satellite communication service. He stated that Ukrainian authorities asked him to turn on Starlink all the way to Sevastopol so they could sink the Russian fleet. He refused because he feared an escalation of the war. So a slight kind of twist on that. So it's like he didn't turn it off, he just didn't turn it on as far. That's how I interpret what he's saying there. So yeah, the Starlink regions in question were not activated. SpaceX did not deactivate anything. So, but of course, that's not what his biography's reporting. And who do you believe? I don't know. But the Ukraine, it would be weird if that was okay. What's the evidence against what Musk is saying? Is that they wouldn't have done a mission that required connectivity into a certain area, sent the drones out, and then asked him to activate that area. I mean, that just makes no sense, right? So they're wasting their brand new drones that they've never been seen before, sending them out on a mission. Oh, by the way, the last quarter of the mission, we have no connectivity with the drones. Yeah, send them out anyway. I'm on the phone to Musk and just make sure he's going to activate that. Oh, you're not going to activate it. Oh dear, we've lost the drones. So that makes no sense. What does make sense is that he deactivated what they already thought would be available. Right? That makes more sense of actually what happened. So that would tend me towards believing the claims in the biography rather than Elon Musk's counterclaim there. So make that what you will. Right, Trentelenko says massive reduction in Russian armed forces checkpoints means that the Ukrainian special forces and partisans have much more freedom of movement. So what's this coming from? So this is coming from a P-Star 11 comment here or observation that Ukrainian partisans continue to report a decrease in the number of Russian checkpoints in the south. In other words, the forces are being sent to the front line and they don't have the forces to do checkpoints. Previously, there were 18 Russian checkpoints on the way from Dnipro to Melitopol via Mikhailovka. However, there are now only 3, 18 to 3. At that exit from Dnipro, at the exit from Mikhailovka, and at the entrance to Melitopol, check selectively, not all. Apparently tired. Looks like they're getting ready to leave. So there are lots of claims about Tokmak being cleared out, about the Russians, drawing or extracting loads of stuff out of Tokmak because they fear that's going to topple. And then the same could be said for Melitopol as well. Okay. and a Russian Telegram channel complaining that Ukrainians are intercepting their radio channels and can even decipher the ECM 256 encoding system. And obviously, that's really, really important. Now, going back to Musk, I've got this somewhere, but there are claims that the hacking, there were attempted hacks on Ukrainian comm systems, and I think it was on Starlink systems. I don't know how successful they were, but the Russians are definitely attempting to hack the Ukrainians, as you would expect them, right? And that is specifically the Starlink systems. And one of the advantages of the Starlink systems have been that they have been unable, they are secure, right? Anyway, that's today's news update. Please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching, and all your opinions would be gratefully received below, as long as they are respectful, etc., etc. Take care. Speak soon.